No one is coming to save you. No one can endure your pain for you, carry your worries, or walk the path meant for your life. And one day, you'll realize not in panic, but in stillness, that it is you who must move forward. No one else. Not because you're unloved, but because no one can live your life except you. We often fear being alone, as if it signals failure or a flaw. But those who have walked through suffering with awareness know this. Solitude is not emptiness. It is a return. A return to yourself where there is no applause, no expectations, no roles to play. That is where the real journey begins, not an escape from the world, but a turning inward. Because only when you have the courage to sit alone in stillness can you truly hear your own voice. And from that place, growth begins. Now, let us step into the essence. 1. You must walk alone, not to be separate, but to become yourself. No one else can live your life for you. They may walk with you for a while, share joy, offer comfort when you're in pain, but they cannot step inside you to bear the doubts, fears, and silent battles you face each day. There will be moments in life when you realize that no one truly understands you, not because they don't care, but because that's the nature of life. Every person is a world unto themselves, and no one can fully grasp another's inner reality. And it's from that place you realize the path to true growth is a solitary one. Walking alone is not a sign of isolation, not a mark of being lost, nor a form of punishment. It is an invitation to return to yourself, an inner journey, where you stop living for others' expectations, stop chasing approval, and start listening to the voice that rises from within. Only when there's no one left to please do you begin to live according to what you truly believe. And only then does change become authentic. Not to be more loved, not to be praised, but to live in alignment with your own truth. We often confuse companionship with guidance, but the truth is, no one knows how you should live except you. Others may offer advice, suggestions, even empathy, but they don't feel your heartbeat, your wounds, your quietest dreams. No matter how well-meaning, every piece of advice is only a temporary map. The real path must be drawn by your own steps, your own stumbles, your own courageous moments of facing what's true. To walk alone is to stop seeking validation from the outside. It is to stop using others' eyes as your mirror. It is to understand that your worth does not come from being seen, but from your willingness to see yourself. In the quiet of solitude, no audience, no stage, no role, you face the unmasked self. And it is there that truth begins to speak. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig." But to reach that source of strength, you must walk alone. No one can walk into your inner darkness for you. No one can face the fears you've buried. And no one can feel the quiet transformation that happens when you choose to sit with yourself rather than run. And strangely, when you're no longer afraid to walk alone, the path becomes clearer than ever. Not because it's easy, not because it's filled with light, but because, for the first time, you are truly walking with your own feet, not borrowed, not pretending, not lost. It's a journey without noise, without haste, not meant for everyone, but it's the only journey that can lead you back to the person you were born to become. 2. Isolation is not punishment, it is purification. We grow up in a world that teaches us constant connection is necessary to survive. That solitude is somehow wrong, the outcome of failed relationships, a symptom of sadness or mental instability. But if we pause long enough to observe, we'll see that it's often during those quiet, solitary times, the days without people, The hours without anyone calling our name when the mind begins to clear. Isolation, when seen rightly, is not life's punishment. It is the chance to shed noise, to cleanse the invisible dust from awareness. It is the process of filtering out the unnecessary to keep only what truly matters. In silence, you begin to realize how long you've lived to please others. You notice that your thoughts are no longer your own, shaped by habit, by repetition, by advice from someone you once admired. When alone, there's no one to imitate, no gaze to seek approval from, no crowd to dissolve into. It is then you're faced with the question, what am I living for? Who is living within me, my real self, or a version crafted to fit? Isolation reveals what busyness tries to hide. In daily routines, you can easily fall into the rhythm of life without much thought. You work, you talk, you fill the silence with voices, tasks, and breathless schedules. But in solitude, everything quiets. You can't avoid the truth. Suppressed emotions rise. False beliefs get exposed. Self-destructive habits begin to take shape. This is not collapse, it is cleansing, the necessary pain of a body expelling poison. And from that silence, something begins to grow. You learn to endure your own company. You learn to listen without resistance. You learn to sit still without making excuses to escape. Each time you ride an emotional wave without rushing to suppress it, you strengthen your inner core. Each time you sit with sorrow without labeling it bad, you expand your soul's capacity. And in those quiet moments, transformation begins slowly, but deeply. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." Isolation is the road that leads you there where you're no longer pulled by others' emotions, no longer measuring yourself by society's reactions, no longer living by borrowed standards. You return like a stream that's passed through silt now clear, not because someone washed it, but because time was allowed to purify it. So if life places you in a season of solitude, do not rush to fear it or resist it. Enter it as one steps into a sacred room, not to hide, but to cleanse. Not to retreat, but to prepare. Not to weaken, but to grow strong in a way that is quiet, deep, and truly enduring. 3. True strength is silence. We are taught to believe strength must be displayed. It must be loud. It must command fear. It must dominate the room. But the Stoics didn't believe that. To them, strength was not a performance. Real strength, in their eyes, didn't need to be seen, didn't need applause, didn't need noise. It was a grounded state of being quiet, yet unshakable like a tree with roots deep in the earth. No one sees the roots, but they are what hold the tree through storms. Those with true strength don't need to say much. They don't need to defend every criticism, don't need to prove they're right, don't need to win every argument, because they understand that value lies not in words, but in inner control. Silence to them is not a lack of words, it is a deliberate choice. Not because they can't speak, but because they don't need to. Not because they have no voice, but because sometimes silence is the strongest voice. Silence demands courage. It's easier to react, to lash out, to fight back against things that hurt us. It's harder to stay calm, to maintain dignity when misunderstood, criticized, or ignored. The weak need to shout to feel powerful. The truly strong don't. They let actions speak. They let stability be the answer. They refuse to let others dictate their emotions because they've learned to remain still in moments where most would rage, panic, or break. Marcus Aurelius, A man who held supreme power chose to write a private journal not for fame, but to stay awake. No one was there to read it, no one to praise him, and still, he wrote each page a testament to a kind of strength that needs no audience. Strength rooted in control, in reason, in honest self-reflection. He didn't use words to overpower others, but to train himself daily in silence. Silence is also where inner strength is forged. When you sit alone, no phone, no social media, no one to talk to, you begin to hear your inner rhythms. The thoughts you repeat, the emotions without names, the dreams you've abandoned, all of it resurfaces the things you left behind, chasing the noise. In that stillness, you begin to rebuild from within. There's no applause for this process, but it's where you become your strongest, not because others see you, but because you see yourself. True strength does not seek display. It lives like a flame under coals, not bright, but never extinguished. It shows in your calm during chaos, in your refusal to retaliate, in your choice to be kind when no one is watching. And that is what this world needs. People quiet enough to listen, steady enough to stay centered, and deep enough to let their silence become the foundation of every meaningful act. 4. Stillness is the greatest teacher. In a world where everything is constantly moving, where everyone rushes to be heard, to speak, to be seen, stillness becomes a luxury. We're used to filling every empty space with music, words, entertainment, and social media. The mind is pulled from one place to another, constantly occupied. But it is in stillness, when the noise fades, when there is nothing left to do but be present, that we begin to see what we've long avoided: ourselves. Stillness is the teacher that never speaks, but always demands we listen. It doesn't explain, doesn't argue, doesn't force, but compels us to face our nature. It comes not to teach you something new, but to reveal what was already inside. In stillness, you can no longer play roles, alter appearances, or perform. There is only you and your uncensored thoughts, unnamed emotions, the questions you've tried to escape by staying busy. In stillness, the truly important things begin to surface, like reflections in a calm lake too clear to ignore. You see the recurring patterns in your thinking, the nameless fears, the wounds you thought had healed but were merely hidden. Stillness doesn't hurt you, it just makes it impossible to keep lying to yourself. And that is why it becomes a harsh but necessary teacher, because all real growth begins with honesty. Marcus Aurelius didn't seek wisdom in crowds, but in the stillness of his nightly journals. Epictetus didn't need a stage to speak of freedom, he found it within himself, listening to the quiet in the storm of a slave's life. The greatest minds did not learn their greatest lessons from debate, but from the hours with no one to convince, nothing to resist, just themselves and their thoughts. Stillness teaches that not every question needs an immediate answer. Not every emotion needs a reaction, not every thought deserves belief. It teaches you to observe before you act, to take a deep breath before you say something irreversible. It shows you that sometimes the most courageous act is to endure, not to fight outwardly, but to stay steady inwardly. You cannot learn this in crowds, in chaos, in a life demanding instant responses. Only when you are brave enough to sit in silence, to let it do its work, revealing, cleansing, reflecting, do you begin to truly grow. And one day, you'll realize that your best decisions, your deepest insights, your most lasting changes didn't come from the noise, but from the quiet moments where your greatest teacher was whispering. 5. The solitary journey is a test of self-mastery. No one truly matures without walking a solitary path. No one can be free if they still live by impulse, driven by emotion, waiting for someone to lead, and no one is truly strong if they've never stood alone in a hard decision, without a hand on their shoulder, without approval, without applause or assurance. It is in these moments of solitude that a person faces the greatest truth. If you don't govern yourself, everything else will fear, desire, avoidance. The solitary journey is like a desert you must cross to shed your unnecessary layers. On that path, you can't shift blame, can't make excuses, can't wait for others to fix things. Every mistake is yours. Every lesson must be absorbed by you. Every step forward is the result of your own commitment, not someone else's pressure or expectation. And because no one else is there to balance you out, you're forced to confront your raw self, the anger, the weakness, the unconscious habits, and decide whether to keep letting them lead. The Stoics saw self-mastery as the height of freedom. They didn't seek to control the world, but to govern their reactions to it. They didn't chase perfection, but steadiness. They knew strength didn't lie in changing others, but in changing oneself when the world refuses to bend. And there is no place that trains this better than solitude, where you're not distracted by outside expectations, where there's no one left to please, where you are alone with yourself and your quiet choices. When you're alone, you learn to observe without judgment. You begin to distinguish fleeting emotions from lasting values. You learn to pause before reacting, to choose your words with care, to stay true to your principles even when no one is watching. And through this process, you build a rare quality in this world: resilient independence. Independence from emotions, circumstances, opinions, or outcomes. You begin to live as the driver, not the one being dragged along. This is not an easy path. It requires you to bear the discomfort of having no companion. It makes you look at the less admirable parts of yourself. It forces you to reject shortcuts and embrace the long, slow work of inner transformation. But the reward is unmatched. You become someone you can trust. A person not easily swayed by crowds, not easily shaken by criticism, not easily manipulated by the hunger for validation. A person who knows who they are, where they stand, and what they choose, not because they must, but because they are free to. And that is the ultimate purpose of the solitary journey. Not to make you cold, but to make you whole. Not to remove you from life, but to return you to it stronger, clearer, and more in command of yourself than ever before. 6. Only when you no longer need to be understood can you truly help others. At our core, we crave to be understood. We want others to know why we act a certain way, why we stay silent, why we choose paths different from theirs. We long for someone to listen and validate the feelings, dream, and pain we carry. But that longing, if left unchecked, becomes a burden. Because when we live to be understood, we begin to alter ourselves to meet expectations, to avoid being misjudged, to sidestep criticism. And in doing so, we lose our truth. The Stoics understood that the desire to be understood is natural, but it should not be the condition for our existence or our service. As long as you say, "I'll only be at peace if they understand me," you've handed your emotional state to the world. And the irony is, the harder you try to explain, the more you wish to be understood, the more likely you are to be misunderstood. The truth is, there will always be people who misinterpret your words, your actions, or simply lack the life experience to grasp what you're going through. And that's okay. Once you release the need to be understood, you reach a deeper level of inner freedom. You're no longer wounded by others' silence, no longer feel the need to prove anything. You grow quiet, but not cold, calm, but not distant. And from that space, you begin to genuinely help others. Because you're no longer entering their lives to be acknowledged, praised, or thanked. You help not to be seen, but because you are full enough within to give. Those still seeking to be understood may unconsciously turn their help into a cry for validation, but those who've let that go are different. They listen without interrupting. They're present without needing a reaction. They support without stepping into the spotlight. Because they don't help to prove themselves, they help from a foundation that no longer needs outside nourishment. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Do what is right, the rest, let it happen as it will." What is right is not always understood, but when you stop seeking agreement, you can do what is right with a truly light heart. You don't need to be understood to keep walking. You only need to know that you're walking on solid values, unshaken by nods or praise. And in that space, when you no longer expect to be understood, you begin to see others with genuine compassion. You won't judge those who resist you, because you know they too are on their own journey, struggling to be understood. And instead of demanding, you quietly become a place of peace for them, not through words, but through presence, steady, calm, undemanding. And perhaps that is the most profound help one human being can offer another. 7. Your inner fortress is a place no one can enter unless you allow it. In life, there will be times when you're betrayed, misunderstood, abandoned, or even insulted by those you trust most. There will be moments when the world outside feels so chaotic that you feel like a leaf drifting in a flood, directionless and unanchored. But no matter how shaken life becomes, there is one place no one can trespass without your permission. Your inner fortress where your freedom, dignity, and self-respect remain intact. The Stoics did not seek safety in circumstances, but in how they governed their minds. Epictetus once said, "No one can harm you unless you allow it." He didn't mean to deny emotion or act indifferent, but to understand that emotion only erupts when we let others step into our minds and take hold of the reins. When you learn to uphold your inner boundaries, you no longer let someone else's anger dictate your response. No longer let criticism distort your self-worth, and no longer let carelessness rob you of your inner calm. This inner fortress is not built of stone or steel, but of discipline and awareness. Each time you respond slowly instead of exploding, you lay another brick. Each time you choose silence over the need to be understood, you thicken the wall. Each time you sit with your pain instead of numbing it with distraction, you close the gate tighter to your core. Little by little, you build a place no one can access unless you allow it. Not because you're closed off, but because you've learned to protect the sacredness of your inner life. When you live without an inner fortress, you're easily shaken by the smallest things. A cold glance makes you uneasy. A rejection causes self-doubt. A silence is enough to make you feel worthless. But when you've built a foundation within, you no longer need others to validate your existence. You're no longer carried away by every emotional gust from outside. You stand like a tree rooted deep in the earth. It may sway, but it will never fall. That fortress doesn't isolate you from the world. It allows you to engage with it more clearly and steadily. When you're no longer wounded by things unworthy of your peace, you can love without fear, listen without judgment, and give without needing anything in return. Because you know you have a place to return to, a place no one can take away, a place where you are fully yourself, unguarded, genuine, and not trying to earn love. And once you find that fortress, you'll understand that true freedom doesn't lie in doing whatever you want, but in not being shaken by what you cannot control. No one can enter the deepest part of you unless you open the door. And when you no longer open it just to be accepted, you begin to live as a truly independent soul, free in thought, and at peace with every step you take. 8. Detachment is an act of love for yourself. Along the journey of life, we often mistake love for attachment. We think that to love means to always be present, to react, to do everything we can to be seen and held on to. We fear distance, coldness, and the loss of connection, so we cling to what exhausts us, drains us, and distances us from ourselves. But love does not mean sacrificing inner peace to maintain closeness. And holding on doesn't mean you're loving rightly. Sometimes it is detachment that best expresses love, a love that begins with respecting yourself. Detachment is not retreating out of resentment or judgment, but realizing where boundaries are needed to keep your heart and mind from being pulled into what disconnects you from yourself. When you step away from a heated argument, you're not indifferent, you're choosing peace over being right. When you leave a relationship that makes you feel small, you're not betraying anyone, you're returning to protect the parts of yourself you've neglected for too long. And when you choose silence over seeking approval, you're not being cold, you're preserving the space your soul needs to breathe. The Stoics understood that to live by reason and inner values, you must sometimes step back not because you don't care, but because you care appropriately. You no longer let others' emotions steer your path. No longer let praise or blame manipulate your self-respect. No longer let external expectations blur your boundaries. Detachment does not reject love. It is love practiced with clarity, not losing yourself while loving another. When you depend on recognition, promises, or someone's presence to feel whole, you are living in a fragile state. You become easily hurt, easily swayed, easily lost. But when you begin detaching from the need to be understood, to be chosen, to be kept, you'll feel lighter, clearer, and more honest. You no longer live to please, you live in alignment with what makes you whole. Detachment is also how you listen more deeply to yourself. When you're no longer distracted by outside noise, you begin to hear what you truly need, where you're tired, what you've been abandoning within. You learn to say no without guilt, to maintain distance without shame, to say enough without thinking yourself selfish. This is not hardness. It is compassion for yourself, a quiet but profound form of love. And you'll realize, the most precious thing you can offer yourself is not indulgence, but protection, not being around everyone all the time, but knowing when to return inward. Not saying yes to every bond, but preserving a quiet place where you don't have to strain to belong. In the end, detachment is not a rejection of others. It is the act of choosing yourself again, with love and dignity. 9. Solitude is a test for cultivating discipline and peace. To the Stoics, solitude is not a frightening state to avoid, but a necessary environment for self-discipline. Without applause, without an audience, without anyone to reward or push you, you're left with yourself. And that is the true test for anyone on a path of inner growth. Because discipline is not born in moments of excitement, but in the quiet hours when you repeat what's right, even when no one sees, no one praises, and nothing changes immediately. Solitude is where you test whether you're steady enough to keep your promises to yourself without reminders, schedules, or spotlights. When you choose to wake up early, exercise, meditate, journal, or simply spend an hour without touching your phone, you're not doing it for anyone else. It becomes a silent commitment to yourself. And each time you honor that commitment, you add another layer to your foundation of self-control, something no one can give you but you. Peace also grows from those moments when you don't run from silence. When you're brave enough to sit in a quiet room without reaching for your phone, without scanning the latest updates, without calling someone to fill the space, you access a deeper level of presence. There, you feel your breath, observe thoughts drifting like clouds, and refuse to be pulled from the moment. That stillness doesn't come by accident. It's the result of practice, the practice of not reacting too fast, not being triggered by trivial things, not selling out your focus and calm because you're afraid of being alone. Solitude is a hidden training ground not for performance, but for grounding. It's the test of whether you can remain consistent even when no one knows you're trying. And if you can stand firm in that emptiness without wavering, breaking, or panicking, then when you return to the world, you'll carry a quiet power that others will feel, even if you say nothing. A strength forged in hours of solitude, honesty, and resilience. 10. Loneliness is not emptiness. It's where you meet yourself again. We often fear loneliness, thinking it means absence, isolation, or that no one needs us anymore. But that's only true when we haven't yet learned how to be with ourselves. Loneliness, through the eyes of an awakened mind, is not a cold and meaningless place. It is a sacred space where all noise fades, and you can finally hear the most important thing, the voice of your true self, long forgotten while chasing the rhythm of the outside world. When no one is around, when there's no conversation forcing you to maintain a role, when no gaze makes you adjust yourself, you begin to return to who you truly are. You recognize emotions once hidden beneath busyness. You see clearly the desires you've never dared to name. And you face the question you once feared most. Who am I when there is nothing left to cling to? That question is not meant to scare you, but to open the door back to where you've always belonged within yourself. The Stoics never saw loneliness as something to avoid, but as an essential part of inner growth. They understood that only in moments of solitude do we see ourselves so clearly that pretending becomes impossible. And when you finally sit down without needing comfort from your phone, validation from social media, or someone to listen just to feel worthy, that is when you begin rebuilding the most important relationship of your life, the one with yourself. Loneliness does not make you weaker. It invites you to look back at the path you've taken, the choices you've made, the pain you've endured, and even the things you've ignored for fear of feeling too much. And in that process, you are not breaking, you are reconnecting. You are not lost, you are returning. You are not losing, you are being given something priceless, the ability to fully live with yourself, without any need for a mask. And once you can be alone without feeling empty, you are no longer lonely in the negative sense. You've touched the deepest part of your being, the place that needs no witness, no confirmation, yet is always there and always welcomes you back. It is not a void, it is where you belong. And once you've met yourself there, you'll never feel adrift in this world again. I used to think loneliness was something to avoid. That if one day I woke up and no one was there, it meant I had done something wrong in life. But after the setbacks, the losses, and the unexpected silences, I realized it was precisely when there was no one left to lean on that I saw myself most clearly. With no one left to impress, no role to maintain, I began learning how to listen to what I truly needed, not what others expected of me. And I understood that walking alone is not a sign of failure, but the beginning of maturity. It forces you to grow from within, to be honest, to live with discipline. And only when you are no longer afraid of solitude can you show up in any relationship with steadiness, fullness, and without losing yourself in order to be loved. If you found value in these reflections, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss upcoming content. Because sometimes, all it takes is one right idea at the right time to light the way forward. And if there's one place you can always return to, it is within yourself. See you in the next video.